Hello, everybody, and welcome to our spring series afternoon lectures at the National Botanic Gardens. I'm delighted to see so many people are interested in this, and it's great that we have people from all over the country, and there's somebody even from Pennsylvania just popped in right now. So it's fantastic. We've always had a great crowd come to our afternoon lectures in the auditorium, but now this is great that we can expand and reach more people, even though we're not in the lecture theatre. So our speaker today is Oisín Duffy, and he works at the National Biodiversity Centre, as I'm sure you're all aware, and he's the manager for the Ireland Citizen Science Portal, which is a very interesting project going forward for all of us now, because he's going to explain to us how we can all be citizen science. Even people who don't have a great knowledge of plants will be able to find out how to identify and record these 20 of our favourite local wildflowers. And this is actually really, I'm sure Oisín is going to point out to you, it's really, really important work, because it will be able to help further plant conservation in Ireland. And we need to know where all these plants are, so to identify them, and where any situation is identified that they need protection. Well, then we'll have the information and the work done to provide the information to get this work done then in the future. So I'm going to, without further ado, invite Oisín to start this presentation.
Good stuff. Yeah, so thank you everyone, and thanks for coming along. As Felicity said, my name is Oisín Duffy. I'm the Surveys and Records Officer with the National Biodiversity Data Centre. And today I'm going to be talking about the Spring Flowering Plants project and a bit of an introduction to Ireland's Citizen Science Portal. So I suppose just for a wee bit of background first, the first thing is what is the National Biodiversity Data Centre? Well, it's a national centre for the collection, collation, management, analysis and dissemination of data on Ireland's biological diversity. Now, it's very wordy, but I suppose in a sense it's really just the flora and fauna that are found around the country. It's basically kind of a management portal for that. And how it works is that citizen scientists in our recorder network, they submit data through a thing called Ireland Citizen Science Portal. And from there, the data becomes validated and verified and eventually ends up on a validated database known as biodiversity maps. So it's actually it's a really easy process to get involved with. If again, as Felicity was saying, if you don't have any kind of background in sciences, don't worry about that at all, because it is super simple to get involved with. I suppose the main thing to keep in consideration with us is that there's lots of different ways to get involved with, and we're going to be using the Spring Flowers project as a gateway to getting involved more in citizen science. So I suppose other projects that are run by the National Biodiversity Data Centre, they kind of range from ones that are for beginners all the way up to experienced and really advanced recorders. So just kind of cherry picked a few of them that you can see here at the bottom left hand corner of the screen. There's the butterfly monitoring scheme and the bumblebee monitoring scheme, and they involve walking a fixed transect over time, once a week for the butterflies and once a month for the bumblebees. You have Dragonfly Ireland, which involves kind of recording species of dragonflies and damselflies throughout the country. You have Explore Your Shore, which is kind of based on the marine and the kind of, I suppose, the seaside kind of aspect. And then you have things like the Rare Plant Monitoring Scheme. So species that are listed as kind of rare or threatened or vulnerable, and recorders go out and see if the populations there are increasing or decreasing, or if there's threats or anything as well. So I suppose since we're going to be based on the Spring Flowers project, just give a little bit of a background on that. Some of you might know the Botanical Society of Britain and Ireland, the BSBI. So this project is it's a joint initiative, and it was kicked off in 2017. And originally there was 14 different species that were chosen that were easily identifiable spring flowers. Last year we bumped that up to 16, and then this year we've added another 4 species. Just to kind of add a little bit more to it, so that there's a little bit kind of more for everyone going forward. So the information that's gathered through the project is really important, because it allows us to update the distribution map for these species, but secondly, I suppose as well, that it allows us to see when species are flowering, when the species are being noticed more as well, and we can, that could be anything due to, things like climate change, or it could be due to just a particularly frosty spring or a particularly mild spring. Things might be out a little bit earlier. So it really is an ideal project for all recorders, and it's really easily accessible for beginners too. The 20 chosen species for the project are relatively easy to identify. There's a few that could give you issues if you're kind of starting off, and even if you're kind of experienced, you just might want to check out some of them. But generally, they're very, very easy to identify. There's identification guides, there's species profiles, and there's regular posts on social media kind of promoting the scheme and helping with identification as well. So if you do get stuck on a plant, just kind of throw it up onto Twitter or Facebook and that, and we'll hopefully be able to get back to you really soon. And again, we'll go at the very end, we'll go through a bit of the actual putting in a record as well. But it's super simple to kind of submit the records through the Citizen Science portal. So I suppose without too much further ado, we'll kind of get stuck into the actual introducing the species. So this is the first four out of them, and you can see some of these ones you might have heard of before, and some of them that might be slightly rare. I suppose just to point out as well, we have the common name up here. So as an example for bluebells, you have the Latin name or the scientific name Hyacinthoides non-scripta, and we also have the Irish names present, Seachtain the Gaeilge, so why not? You might notice as well at the bottom right-hand corner of each of the pictures, there is a small map of Ireland, and it's coloured in with either kind of red or yellow squares, and that's the actual distribution map. So where the species is found, and the kind of the frequency that it's found with. So you can see that bluebells are found in found throughout much of the country, in comparison to something like early dog violet, which has a slightly more kind of dispersed distribution. So I suppose bluebells are kind of a nice one to start off with. I'm sure kind of everyone really knows what they look like. They carpet the woodland floor from around kind of late April coming into May. They're a distinctive blue-purple flower, generally kind of hangs over in one side. The only thing that you could really mix this up with is something like a Spanish bluebell, or maybe even the hybrid between the two. But generally, with the others, the color's not as strong, and generally the flowers kind of go all the way around. They're kind of whorled around the actual stem of the plant, whereas bluebells kind of hang in a nice strip. They're generally found in kind of woodland areas too, but you sometimes see them even kind of growing in some kind of nice under tree lines and things like that. The common dog violet is a species that will be coming into flower now in the next month or so. And it kind of flowers from spring really all the way into summer. Distinctive kind of violet blue flowers, and you'll find this along the woodland floors. You'll find it even kind of in hedgerows, in tree lines and that. And the only really kind of similar species you're going to get to this, apart from the other violets really, is the early dog violet. And while again with everything with plants is that there's sometimes it can be difficult to tell the difference between them, because they are you don't always get them looking perfect like they are in the books or like they are on the photos on a nice good day. But one of the things with common dog violet is if you turn the flower around or look behind the flower, there should be a white spur that's notched, and you can see that quite well in the picture in the top right hand corner there, compared to something like the early dog violet, which generally has a purple spur that's not notched. Again, some of these things you might be thinking, God, that seems like a lot of detail, but after a while of kind of looking at these things, you'll find that maybe common dog violet's the only one that's in your area, or maybe early dog violet's the only one that's in your area. It's one of these things, just getting your eye in and checking for these features is kind of a good idea. The one over in the bottom left-hand corner is early purple orchid, and this is a great one because orchids are generally considered difficult to identify. But the great thing about early purple orchid is that it's generally out in flower before any of the other orchids are out in kind of the June, July time. So if you're seeing something flowering in May, then it's probably going to be something like early purple orchid. But one of the things that you can look for in this is that the middle lobe is white, generally kind of pale whitish with these darker kind of purple markings on it. The spur behind the flower is also upwards pointing. So they're kind of nice little features to look around. And again, don't feel that you have to be kind of taking down notes and all this. All this kind of information is kind of available on the website and that as well. But I suppose it's a very distinctive species. You can see from the distribution map down here that it's not overly common. And again, I suppose with the 5K, the restrictions that are in place at the minute, it's not necessarily that you're going to find all 20 of these species, but you'd probably be surprised about how many you are finding in your area, particularly if you have a bit of a kind of a scrap of woodland around as well. You might start racking up a few species. So onwards then, kind of getting all the ones that might cause any kind of identification issues out of the way first. You have wild garlic and ramsons, and three-cornered garlic. Now, these species, if you have them side by side, you could tell instantly that they look, they don't actually really look that much alike at all. Three-cornered garlic, it kind of is a bell-shaped flower, and it's dripping. The stems and the leaves are kind of like three-sided. Wild garlic has much more belt-like leaves and little delicate star-shaped flowers. But the real thing that kind of causes an issue is that because both of them are garlics and both of them are smell strongly of garlic, people just kind of get wild garlic into their head. They see anything growing and they automatically kind of interchange them. So it's not so much the identification issue; it's more of an issue of just using the wrong name. So that's why sometimes the scientific names or the Latin names are extremely important for input and records. Wild garlic, again, it carpets the woodland floor more so than the three-cornered garlic. It can carpet areas, but you'll much more likely see it in the southeast, particularly the east and southeast, and it can just kind of carpet or form kind of long strings along the hedgerows and roadsides as well. It doesn't seem to have too much of an issue of even growing near walls and kind of almost encroaching on the woodland as well. But again, when you see both flowers in beside each other, if you're lucky enough to have both beside you, you'll notice that they are quite distinctive. The top right-hand corner now we have primrose and then cowslip. So both of these again are in the same family, and I'm sure probably everyone knows primrose. It's a widely kind of planted garden species as well. But you will get it obviously growing in the wild as well. It's a native species. And it's a five-petaled cream flower with this kind of almost like egg yolk yellow center. And you'll find this growing along the woodlands, roadsides, kind of banking areas, things like that. It doesn't seem to be particularly fussy. You'll even get it growing if there's a nice bit of vegetation on top of walls. You'll get it kind of popping along there as well. Generally, the one that grows in the wild is that kind of a creamy yellow color. You will find other varieties that are planted that are pinks and purples and all sorts of different colors. Cowslip is another one, quite a distinctive species. If you're in the north of the country, it's much less widespread. It doesn't really occur much in the northern half of the country. It's species kind of associated more with the southern half. It has these distinctive yellow flowers, and again they have a darker orange marking in the center of the flower, and generally they're all facing one side. So again, you can find this growing anywhere from the burn, some of the kind of nice grasslands there, but you can also get this. I've seen this growing along roundabouts and kind of roadsides and places like Tipperary as well. So depending on where you are, some of these things might be very scarce, but they might also be very common as well. And it has quite a long stem. The only thing that you'd have to be careful about between these two species is that they do hybridize. But again, if you have any difficulty, if you find something out there that you're not quite sure on, or it looks a bit of a mix between the two, you can always just send a photo of it on, and we can have a look at it for you. So kind of getting on to some of the more, I suppose, charismatic woodland species now as well. And that's, I suppose, the thing about the Spring Flowers project is that a lot of these species are woodland based. They kind of crop up that little bit earlier before all the rest of the species are kind of getting going. Wood anemone is a really nice one. This kind of distinctive, delicate six-petaled flower, and it forms these beautiful carpets along the woodland floor. It has a relatively widespread distribution, and you can get it grown from carpet and full areas to kind of be mixed up with things like lesser celandine and opposite-leaved golden saxifrage. But it's one to keep an eye out for. It should be kind of coming into flower within the next few weeks, if not already in certain areas. And again, if you have this in your area, just keep an eye out for a distinctive six-petaled white flower. There's nothing really else that looks quite like wood anemone. Top right, then we have lesser celandine, and this one kind of flowers, to be honest, from kind of almost like January to May onwards. I've already seen ones here in the southeast that are gone over, that are already going to seed. So it is one of the earlier flowering species. If you're probably not today with how the weather is, but if you're out tomorrow or over the weekend in the next few days and you're out for a walk, then you're probably very likely to see this in full flower. So it has yellow flowers, 8 to 12 petals, and it's found in laneways, kind of banking areas, roadsides, woodland lanes, and things like that. Pretty much anywhere really that it can get a foothold at all. You might even see it kind of cropping up in your garden, kind of especially kind of near maybe a boundary wall or a boundary hedge or things like that. And again, this is the species currently at the minute between January 1st and March now. There's over 300 records for lesser celandine that have come in through the Spring Flowers project. So it's the most heavily recorded species so far, and you'd expect that in a way. Probably by the time that May comes around, things like primrose or cuckoo flower, or and potentially even wood anemone or wood sorrel will be kind of vying for the top spot there. Next up is cuckoo flower, or sometimes known as lady smock, and this one it's an interesting species. Not only because it's quite a kind of a nice one and easily identifiable, but it's also the larval food plant of the orange tip butterfly. So when I say larval food plant, it's not necessarily that the adults are using it for food. It's that the caterpillars, the eggs are laid behind the seed pods on the flowers, and the larvae hatch out. The caterpillars come around and they kind of eat the developing seed pods then, and very often it's a kind of a thing it's supposed to add to your botanical sightings on it as well. Just check behind the flowers sometimes, and you might see these distinctive, very very tiny but very distinctive once you see them, orange eggs. And generally, if there's more than one on the flower, then there's going to be issues as the caterpillars are cannibalistic. So yeah, it's definitely an interesting flower. Generally, it's kind of white to a pinky color. It prefers kind of wet and damp habitats, but can also be found coming up in gardens and even kind of gardens that aren't particularly wet. It's upright and it's quite tall as well. It's a 4-petal flower. Again, it's in the kind of the brassica family, so the cabbages or the crucifers as they used to be called. And then on to the next one, the bottom right-hand corner is wood sorrel. So I suppose this is a very distinctive species, and probably more distinctive for its leaves than its actual flower. Generally, it can be difficult to actually see the flower properly opened up. It seems to kind of grow in the slightly damper areas where not as much light is getting through. But if you do happen to get it when it is opened, you'll notice that it's these 5-petal white flowers, but they have these very delicate purple veination running down through the actual petals down into the center, where there's almost a yellow ring. The leaves themselves are trifoliate, so that means that basically they're like a shamrock. They're broken into 3 different sections, and you'll see these even long after the flowering season is over. You'll see them growing on tree stumps or kind of along the woodland floor and things like that. Skipping ahead of myself there. So next up on the list, then there's a few that are, I suppose, a bit kind of odd looking flowers that you necessarily might not have seen before as well. Up first on the top left-hand corner is toothwort, and this is it is an unusual looking species, and it parasitizes the roots of the trees. And one of the things about it that can make it difficult to find is that it doesn't necessarily come up in the same place each year. It can do, but there's sometimes that you kind of go look for it, and you just might miss it. There's some species that are just like that as well. If you do happen to have it in your area, check out near the roots of trees for these kind of pinky white one-sided tubular flowers. It's probably the kind of thing that you'll go, what is that? But if you kind of see anything that looks remotely like it, it is most likely toothwort. And again, if you have any questions on it, you can just kind of send an email in or send a photo on Twitter and that. On the top right-hand corner, then there's lords and ladies, or cuckoo's pint. This species apparently has about 150 different common names, which we won't bother listing as they eat up our time rightly. But it flowers from April to May, and it's another one of these ones. Again, the flower is super distinctive, but now at the minute, you can actually notice on the woodland floor, you'll notice these the leaves. They're arrow shaped and they're a dark glossy green color, and they kind of almost kind of grow in clumps. There are a few There are a few garden varieties as well that have, I think it's the Italian variety has more of a kind of creamy venation throughout the whole leaf. But the flower is, as you can see here in the picture on the left, it has this distinctive kind of pale green to kind of creamy colored spathe with a purple brown spadix. So that's that little bit in the middle there. It's a very, very distinctive species. It looks quite lily-like, and you won't kind of mistake it really with anything else that grows in the wild. At the bottom left-hand corner now we have winter heliotrope, and this is one that I'm sure many people have seen along roadsides. It can kind of take over areas quite quickly, but it's a species that kind of basically it really flowers from November to March. It's a non-native species, and the flowers are a white purple in color, and they're very sweet smelling. Some people say it's vanilla, some people say it's like an aniseed or a licorice kind of smell. So it's well worth. I mean, it's starting to go over now, but if you do find one, it's well worth kind of getting a sniff of it as well, just to kind of get the aroma of it. The leaves are these kind of large kidney-shaped leaves, and sometimes people can confuse something like this with I think another species called butterbur, or sometimes even people kind of get mixed up in this and coltsfoot. But yeah, these distinctive kind of large kidney-shaped leaves, and you'll find them that they can kind of carpet whole areas, whole laneways. If there's a particular time during the winter where a laneway is not being walked, it can kind of just cover over the path very quickly. And on the bottom right-hand corner now we have coltsfoot. So it's quite a distinctive species because it flowers early enough in the season, but often you'll get, especially if you're brand new to botany, people often kind of think, oh well, it looks very much like a dandelion. And I suppose from a distance, it's the kind of thing, if you are a little bit of a distance off, it might superficially resemble a dandelion. However, once you kind of get up close to it, there's a few different little bits and pieces that you'll notice. One of them is that there aren't leaves present when it's flowering, so that comparison to a dandelion, the leaves will be there. They'll be present, these kind of serrated or tooth-like leaves. And the other thing to look, if you're still not certain on it, is check the actual stem, the flowering stem, and it should have these little tiny scales on it, almost like little leaf scales on the actual stem itself, whereas dandelion is generally just a smooth plant. And coltsfoot, again, it's one of these ones that it's not particularly precious about where it grows, kind of gravelly, waste ground areas, edge of car parks, anywhere there's a little bit of disturbance as well, it just kind of pops its head up, and it's a bit of color for a few weeks or a few months, and then the leaves come up later in the year, which are said to resemble a coltsfoot. And I suppose on to the last few now. These are the new 4 edition, and again, I suppose when we were making this up, we were kind of thinking to add a little bit of variety for people, to kind of give a little bit of an incentive to people maybe that are interested, have done it in previous years and kind of want a bit of a new challenge. Again, didn't think necessarily that the 5K would still be in place with this, but so we can probably leave it out unless basically you're based in the Burn. You can disregard the spring gentian. Again, it's really, really well associated with the Burn, and there's nothing else that looks quite like it. It's a bright blue 5-petal flower. And it's probably the rarest species that's actually on the list. Top right-hand corner then is common whitlow grass, and you can see from the distribution map, it looks like it's that there's actually not that many records for it, and I'd say part of that is due to just how kind of how small it is as well. It's very easily overlooked, and it doesn't necessarily grow kind of in kind of beauty spots either. You'll find this kind of growing near the start of dunes and kind of car park areas and kind of bare ground and gravelly areas. It's very, very easy to overlook, but just due to how small it is, and because it has so few records on the maps, it'd be interesting to see whether many records actually come into us. Bottom left hand corner then as well is Alexander's. So this is a member of the umbellifers, or the same family as the carrots or and hogweeds and things like that. And Alexander's is generally it'll be flowering already. Should be well into flowering at this stage. It definitely is locally. So again, the flowers are these kind of greeny yellow, kind of clustered in an umbel, so almost like an umbrella shape. The leaves are dark green and glossy. And apparently the plant also has a distinctive smell. It's not something that I've taken to try it out myself, but apparently it's kind of like almost like a spicy kind of celery kind of scent. And again, the good thing about something like Alexander's is that it's very different looking from hogweed, which has these distinctive white umbels. And it generally as well, it's the one probably the first of the umbellifer family to be flowering as well. And to wrap up the introduction to the top 20 is opposite leaf golden saxifrage. Much easier to identify than it is to say, but it grows from March to July, and generally it's very low growing, and it can carpet areas of damp shaded woodlands. You might also get this growing if you have a small stream or small shuck running along the side of a garden or something like that, and it's very damp and kind of damp and dark. You might even just get this plant kind of growing in your garden if you have the right conditions. And again, it's extremely distinctive species once you actually get to see it, but it is quite small, and because it does grow quite low, you might have to kind of get properly down to the ground to actually kind of get looking at it. And I suppose then the one thing is it's all well and good either knowing the plants. Again, if you don't know them, you can always learn them. There's lots of great resources out there on the website, and again, there's lots of great books as well that you can check out. But I suppose one of the things that we want to do is we actually want people to submit the records as well. So this is just a very quick bit on how to actually take part. So the very first thing you do is you actually go out and look for the spring flowers, and I'm sure everyone has well-worn 5-kilometer walks at this stage. So if you're interested in botany already, this is a great way to kind of maybe kind of shake off a bit of the rust from the winter time and kind of get stuck back into it. If you're completely new to botany, this will be something new for your walks and kind of add another dimension to that. So the main thing is that once you're happy with your identification, you're certain on the species that you've recorded, you go on to Ireland Citizen Science Portal. So you can see down at the bottom right-hand corner here, there's a small screen grab just showing the different bits of information that are needed. So we have our own dedicated spring flowers recording form, which allows kind of you can only record those particular species, those 20 that are on the list. And we're just going to go through, I suppose, just the information that's actually needed. So there's this, in biological recording, there's a thing called the 4 Ws, and that's the who, what, where, when. And this is basically the pieces of information that are needed for a proper biological record. So in this case, the who is your own name and your email address. So you can see here in this one, it says Oisín Duffy and has my email address there. And the reason that we need an email address as well is that if there is an issue with validation for a particular type of species, that the validator can get in touch with you. So if someone sees spring gentian growing up in a showing in Donegal, that maybe the validator can can get in contact with them or something like that. The other thing then is the when, so that's the date that you actually made the observation. So you can see the record date. Again, if you've recorded in the past, so if you go out today and you don't end up submitting your records until Friday, just remember to change the date to the actual date that you've seen that you made the observation. The where in this case is the location name, so that can be either a townland or a village or whatever was closest to you, the county that you're in, and then the spatial reference. So no need to be daunted by the spatial reference. On the right hand side of the screen grab that you see here, there will be a map of Ireland that you zoom into, and you basically just click down into the area that you actually seen the species. So you can see here, this is where the actual National Biodiversity Data Centre is based. And we're just saying that's where we recorded that particular species. So you just literally click on the map, keep zooming in until you can find out where you were, drop the pin on it, and that'll automatically give you your spatial reference. You can see there's a grid reference here that's filled in. I suppose another thing that's kind of worth putting in then is obviously the what. So that's the species name, the species that you actually seen. So you can see here, in this case, we have coltsfoot and the scientific name or the Latin name afterwards, Tussilogo farfara. And another thing that's really can be really helpful, particularly for the validation side of the work, is to include a photo with your record as well. So if you are out and about and you see something, and take a photo of it as well, and that really does kind of help back up the record. It's much more easy to validate then as well. And it does mean as well that if you are having difficulties, you can kind of send that photo in. Some people will go out, they'll take a photo of something, and then they'll come back and study the photo, study the plant, maybe with a field guide beside them then, if they don't have it out with them in the field. And I suppose the very last thing then to do is obviously to save the record. So you can see here it's highlighted here in the red. So to save your record, and that'll be it. Then you'll get a notification at the top of the screen that'll tell you to, thanks for submitting your record. And that's basically it. Then you can check out your records on the Citizen Science portal, and there'll be kind of information then on the social media as well about how many records are coming in, and for what species. So I suppose that's really kind of the whistle-top stir for the Citizen Science portal and the Spring Flowers project. And again, probably the best thing now at this stage is to kind of pass it over for some questions from yourselves, just to, I suppose, that's probably the best way of kind of learning now. If there's any questions that people have, we'll hopefully try and answer them as best we can.
Okay, am I back on? Oisín, I have a question before we go, or more maybe a statement really, but when I was looking at this first, I thought it was going to be all native plants, but I'm interested to see you have some non-natives.
Yeah, so I suppose the thing is, I suppose when people hear, when people hear, I suppose, spring flowers, they might automatically think that we're going to be talking about kind of garden plants and that as well. But it generally is native species, but there are a few like the winter heliotrope and the three-cornered garlic that we've added in, and it's purely on a case basis that it's nice to have these kind of species that we're trying to kind of map what's happening with them as well, and because they're flowering at this particular time, it seemed kind of sense, it makes sense to add them to the list as well.
Well, what I was wondering was a reason for it, in that if you can identify that they're invading. For example, I know on the banks, and I haven't been there a couple of years now in Rosslare Strand at this stage, but up on the cliffs there in Rosslare Strand, they were just completely covered with that wild garlic.
Yeah, and I suppose that's the thing for it really, is it is really just a case of it's very easy to kind of incorporate them into the project. They're flowering anyway at this time. It's likely that records will be coming in from them anyway, so they may as well be targeted in there. And again, we can see if their distribution is increasing. You can see from the distribution map that we had up that it is more of a kind of a southern and kind of easterly one. It was not as common in the northwest. So it is good to keep an eye on it and kind of actively track where these species are popping up as well.
Okay, perfect. Okay, well, listen, let's just go through other people's questions now.
Good stuff.
First, we've got that that's already answered. When recording a spring wildflower sighting, how precise do you require the location info to be?
Okay, so I'll just take it back to this one, if everyone can still see. So basically, the three bits of information you need for I suppose that where part, the location, is the location name. So it's a case, generally, a village or a townland. Townland's probably best if you can, but if not, then you can do, the nearest village or whatever like that. The county is obviously, it's a very kind of broad part, but the spatial reference, you shouldn't have to worry too much about the level of detail on it, because once you log your sighting on the map of Ireland and you zoom into exactly where you found it, that's enough detail for us. So it's a 6-figure grid reference that's given there. Yeah. So it's kind of, you don't have to worry too much about bringing a GPS out or anything like that. It's kind of taken care of through the actual recording system itself.
Brilliant. And that was a question from Oisín Duffy. And there's another one down here from Ramune. Can you do the spring flower recording using the Biodiversity app on your phone?
You can. There isn't a dedicated recording form on the Biodiversity app, but you can submit all the species that are found on it through the app. Now the one caveat I'll have about the app is that it's for live recording only. So if you're going for a walk right now, you can bring the app on, turn your GPS on, walk, and you can we add the species as you're walking along. What you can't do with the app is you can't retrospectively put a record in. So you can't go for your walk and then load up the app once you're back to the house and then put them, because the GPS won't pick up, or it'll put all the records for your house where you've actually inputted the record. So it is a case that if you're doing retrospective recording, it's the Citizen Science portal, the web application is where to go for that. But you can take part. You can put in records for coltsfoot and all the rest of the species through the app.
Okay, so we have a sort of horticultural-based question for you now, Oisín. I hope you're up for it. It's from, I've been digging out winter heliotrope as it's taking over parts of my land. Does it have any benefits for wildlife? Oh, I thought they were going to ask you how to do it, sorry.
No, I suppose, it's like what I suppose with a lot of these things, like you hear people saying that it can be quite good for pollinators in the winter. I suppose it's hard to know because it can, it can kind of shade out native species that are coming up as well. So I suppose if it's in a garden area, then I suppose if you're trying to get rid of it, it's I suppose it's all kind of it's all a bit of a balancing act, really. It's kind
It is
of a
really.
hard one to know with the ones that are kind of non-native. What really is. I mean, sometimes you don't know until maybe 20 or 30 years down the line the real impacts that they're having. But just because something is good for bees doesn't necessarily make it necessarily good for the rest of the ecosystem if it doesn't necessarily belong there.
Yeah, I see. I have a huge amount of bumblebees in my own garden at the moment, and they're coming to see, the hellebores.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, they love them now. They're not obviously not native. Now, here's a nice one for you. I need to plant a hedge, definitely not Leylandii. The area takes a lot of groundwater from a field. Any ideas, please?
Well, I'll just caveat it by saying that I have absolutely no background in horticulture or anything like that. But if you're looking at trees that are particularly decent in kind of wet conditions, you're talking about stuff like alder and willows, really. Ash can deal with a bit of water as well. But yeah, definitely alder's a really super one in kind of wet conditions
Yeah.
and I suppose. But generally, when people plant willows, I mean, it could be the kind of thing that they can kind of take over a little bit as well.
Do you have plans to add any further species to the spring flower list for future years?
At the minute, we're thinking we'll see how the 20 goes this time. Probably what we don't want is for it to become too sprawling as well. The 20 is quite a nice, it's a nice round figure, and we can kind of keep on top of all that as well. And I think the more if you ended up having 50 species, you'd end up having things that are really rare, and you'd end up running into a lot more confusion species. So for the meanwhile, definitely for probably the next year or so, we'll probably keep it at the 20 species, unless we're noticing other species that are coming in that are getting a lot of records that would do with having a recording kind of initiative.
And are you interested in multiple records from sites? See this one, for example, Alexander report from a site in January and more flowering there in March.
Yeah, like I mean, I suppose in a sense it's kind of almost personal preference. Some people record literally every day when they're out for the walk, and they record maybe the same species. Some people do it, once a week, once a month, or whatever. It is really kind of personal preference. I suppose for something like the Spring Flowers project, if you recorded, Alexander's once and it's flowering in January, and then you get it again in the same spot, you could probably put that in once a month, and that it kind of allows for there's enough time that's going past that you can kind of notice variation on the other species that are coming up around it. You don't have to be out recording something every day unless it's something particularly rare. If there's greater spotted woodpecker flies into your garden or something like that, then that's probably worth recording, for every visit that you get. But if it's a relatively common species, then on a kind of a drawn back scale is probably completely fine. But yeah.
Okay, and what about do they have to be in flower for you to record them?
No, they don't have to be in flower. Generally, if you're starting off with botany, or we're kind of biological recording in general, we would advise that you would kind of wait till they're in flower, and that's just purely so that to give yourself the best kind of start on, because a lot of people will start off with things and they realize maybe there's nothing flowering in their area, and they try and do things by the leaves, and really suddenly they kind of get like really disheartened with it, because it's one of those things when you start anything, everything looks the same. So it's all well and good taking out Webb's flora and going through and trying to make sense of that. But if you're a beginner, those things are really, really difficult. So I would say if you're a beginner, definitely wait until there's a few things in flower. But if you're already doing a bit of recording and you kind of would, know the leaf shapes and things like that, then certainly put in the record before it even comes into flower.
Exactly. Now here's another one. God, there's lots of questions today, Oisín. Is there a printable sleeve or a handy app with the 20 plants on them?
Is there a, sorry, could you say that one again, Felicity?
I mean, is there a handout or something? Or is there
we do
20 on?
Yeah, we have a list. We don't actually have like I suppose like a spotter sheet or anything like that. But if there's enough interest in something like that, it'd be quite handy probably to develop, and people could probably just download it then. But at the minute we have all the species listed on the project website, and from there, they kind of go into more, when you click on the actual picture of the species, it'll bring you into a species profile. So it'll give you more information on it, the kind of the habitats that it's found, information about its ID and everything like that. But again, if there's like a spotter sheet kind of idea that people are liking as well, then it might be something we're able to develop.
Now here's a question. And which are the easiest to grow in pots, please? And native plants now, they're not always that easy to grow in plants because they want to grow all over the place.
Yeah, I suppose it's an interesting one. Like, I mean, growing native species kind of, if you're probably talking if you've collected seed the year before. So again, it's one of these things like, collecting seed and planting things we kind of just associate with kind of more kind of, maybe growing for, for your own eating, or just kind of, pretty flowers kind of thing. But for growing native species, it can be a little bit more difficult. I'm not certain that what ones would be the easiest to actually propagate. But I'm sure there's probably, I'd say the All Ireland Pollinator Plan have information on collecting seed of native species as well, and I think they have information on how to actually kind of like, propagate and cleaning the seed, and because there's a lot of things about kind of storage and not letting mold get on the seeds and kind of cleaning all the chaff from them and stuff like that. So there's I suppose it's a little bit kind of more a little bit more complex. Growing them in pots, I'm not certain what would be the handiest. I'm sure probably something like primroses would probably be very easy.
Kind of, but it's hard to keep growing extra, but you get to see.
Yeah, probably something that the easiest one to probably grow would probably be the three-corner garlic, but you don't want to introduce that to your garden, certainly not. No.
Do not. Okay, let's see what are so many questions here. Okay, one of the questions: would king fire crocosmia, which isn't the same as Montbretia, be good for a wet area?
Oh, to be honest, again, I don't have a horticultural background at all, so my knowledge on the kind of garden, more kind of garden plants.
Which is another fairly invasive plant as well. The smaller orange one, then the other one is a bigger red one, I think.
Yeah.
They're very hardy though. Once they get established in your garden, it's hard for them to leave. But I don't know about the wet part. We'll have to find out. We'll have to ask a higher echelon the answer to that. We'll add it on. We'll get it for you later.
Yeah.
Okay, here's one for you. The wild primroses that grow around my area in West Cork are pale pink. Is this unusual?
To be honest, for the wild ones that I've seen, I haven't really seen wild ones that have been any other color than the kind of the yellowy cream color. Again, it could just be there could be a certain amount of natural variation there, or it could be that even if there's kind of if there was human settlement there, even a couple of 30, 40 years back, and people kind of dump out garden waste, you'll kind of notice kind of funny things kind of cropping up along the edges of boundary walls and things like that. But certainly it's something worth recording as well. Just again, all the ones that I've seen that are wild have generally been that kind of nice kind of creamy yellow color.
Yeah. Okay. Well, unless they're hybridized with something in a garden, but yeah, I mean, you'll be able to buy primulus that are beautiful pink or.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Buy them. Yeah. Okay, here's another one. Are there any apps that you could suggest for the novice botanist?
To be honest, I haven't really. I'm assuming they're talking about the ones where you take a photo and it kind of throws back, a few different options and tells you.
Yeah, there are a few different ones out there.
I've heard of ones. I'd be slow to recommend any. One, because I haven't used them, and two, from the people that I've talked to that have used them, they're generally kind of on a global scale. So if you take a picture of a plant here in Ireland, it may have the right species. It could be one of the these 5, but 4 of the other ones could be North American species or could even be Southern American species. So it's almost like buying a Flowers of the World book and trying to weed down. You're probably best trying one, the guides that are on the website, and then 2, like a wildflower field guide that's based on just Irish species. It can't be said enough just how important it is they have species, even ones that you buy that are Ireland and the UK. There's a lot of species that occur in the UK that don't occur in Ireland. So having something that's just solely based on Irish species is really important. I mean, you have the Wildflowers of Ireland by Zoe Devlin, which is really good for kind of it's good for I suppose for all groups, but particularly the beginner botanist because it's done by color. You have the Collins guide, and then I suppose there's Blamey and Fritter. That's another wildflower guide that's kind of done by illustrations. But yeah, I would suggest probably books or kind of web-based resources rather than apps. Yeah.
Yeah, not to cross over on you, because Zoe's Wildflowers of Ireland is on the web as well, as you know.
Yeah.
Yeah. Out and about, they've got Wi-Fi, they can do it. And just the same, Miss Zoe Devlin has told us that there's plenty of pink primroses in Wexford, which I haven't seen wild either.
Excellent.
Not there anymore, but you can see from my accent that's where I come from. Oh, how discrete from one another need sightings of same species to be recorded separately? That's a kind of
yeah. So I suppose like if it has a different spatial reference, so whenever you're going onto the map, if like say if you are recording, like I was taking a walk through the woods there just yesterday, and the lesser celandine is effectively almost grown for half a kilometer through the woods. Yeah. So it is a case that if I'm adding the record for that, when I go in, I'll just kind of jump it up, and when the grid reference changes, I'll add a new record then. So I suppose there's no point in adding 10 records for that one grid reference. Now again, you can do it on different days, but if it's on the one day, I would generally just kind of space it out using the actual spatial reference guide that's on the mapping system.
Okay.
I think that's probably the easiest.
Now this is a question: which wildflowers from your list are edible?
Ooh, one thing I will say, again, another nice caveat, I don't have a foraging background or anything like that, so always check with a reputable foraging guide before you do anything. But obviously the garlics are edible, both the wild garlic and I believe the three-cornered garlic. I believe people use that, but I think the taste isn't as nice as the wild garlic. Wood sorrel, the leaves are edible, taste quite like apple skins, or kind of those almost like sour apple sweets. The only thing is don't eat too much of it because there's an oxalate poisoning that can build up in your body if you eat too many of them. I think even the Alexanders, I think people have a go with that, but generally I kind of just leave the plants be where they are. But again, generally it definitely would be best to check out either maybe the Wild Food Relatives book that Tom Curtis did and Paul Williams did, or there's any number of foraging guides, because again, just because you see something that's edible doesn't necessarily mean that you should eat it as well. That's the other thing.
You have to make sure you've done the correct identification.
Yeah, that's really important, and obviously the whole kind of protocol of just remembering that if it's low growing on the ground, you don't know what's been walking past it or anything like that.
Lords and ladies wouldn't be one to eat, for example.
No, that it's all parts of the plant there are poisonous.
Exactly.
And so that's definitely one to stay away from. And I suppose that's why it's important to, as you say, to make 100% certain you have the right species first. But again, always consult a reputable foraging guide for that, because some parts of a plant might be edible and some parts, as they say, all things are edible, but sometimes some things only once.
Yeah. Oisín, I wonder, would you be able to help again with the native bluebell identification?
Yeah, surely. To be honest, I don't have the Spanish bluebell up in front of me, but generally, the native bluebells, what you can see is that if you get a hybrid growing along, or if you even get the Spanish ones that are kind of growing in along with it, they're generally taller. The hybrids are generally that little bit taller. I think it's to do with the kind of the hybrid vigor kind of thing. They're generally a lighter blue, almost kind of a lighter blue than what something like harebell would be. So kind of almost getting kind of verging on like a sky blue color. And generally the flowers are still bell shaped, but they're almost going around the whole flowering stem. So they're almost like whorled around the whole flowering stem. Whereas the native bluebell, it's a little bit more delicate looking, and all the flowers are on one side, and it's generally kind of dripping on one side. Generally, you'll see some of the kind of the Spanish bluebells. You'll often see them being kind of planted, outside kind of cottage areas or outside gardens, and that's kind of how they spread out, kind of then, with compost and things like that, and then they just eventually kind of make their way and can end up hybridizing. But I think there's also some bits on the pollen color as well as another feature that you can go by. And I think the scent, the smell, there's I think the smell of the native bluebells is sweet, whereas I think the hybrids in the Spanish are less so, or don't actually have a scent.
Uh-huh. Okay, well, I think we've actually come unbelievably to the end of our questions. That was quite a lot. I say that was almost a record now. It shows the genuine interest people have. I'm sure we all love our lovely wildflowers when they start to come up this time of the year. It's just fantastic. I just wish I was more out in the wild part of Ireland to see more.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Not at all. Thank you.
Great pleasure. And if anybody needs to contact you, of course, or if you've got anything else that you'd like to say back to your gang, that'd be great. Or back to your whole, you will have a whole new plethora of recorders now after this, hopefully.
Yeah, and again, I suppose the one major thing, as I said, if you are able to submit a photo along with your record, it's a really important point for when I'll be doing the validation on the records. It does make it that a little bit easier just to have the photo, and it also means as well, like if for whatever reason, if you are making a mistake on something, it means as well that if you'd like to be contacted with something, or if you put in the comments that you're uncertain, it's always better to come and send something to us in an email or on social media first before inputting the record, and that way then we can kind of talk you through the IEDs and give a few more tips and stuff like that. But thanks a million for everyone, I suppose, for coming along. Do get involved, even if you put in one record. I'm sure with the amount of people that are here today, it'll bump up the numbers a bit. And if anyone has any questions, it's oduffy@biodiversityireland.ie, and you'll also get me on Twitter at @OshDuffy. So
that's great, and thank you everybody for tuning in today. We have people from all over Ireland and from America and lots of different parts of the world too. Great. Some countries in Europe as well. So it's great for us. It's great to meet you all again, and hopefully we'll see you next week for our next lecture. Thanks again, Oisín, and we'll sign off.
Thank you, Nate. Bye now.
Bye.